Trenching and excavation are a regular part of construction operations and are required for a wide range of construction projects. However, it can be one of the most dangerous operations in the construction industry. According to OSHA, this leading job site hazard causes an average of 54 fatalities each year. Understanding the risks associated with trenching and excavation can help you prevent bodily injury and fatalities. Hi, I'm Sergio with A&H Safety, and today we'll be covering the 5 most common trenching and excavation safety hazards and what you can do to protect yourself and your crew. Before we jump into the hazards associated with trenching and excavation, let's briefly talk about the operation itself so that we're all familiar with this task and also explain the difference between trenching and excavation. Excavating is the actual task or activity being performed. OSHA defines excavating as any man-made cut, cavity, trench, or depression in an earth's surface formed by earth removal, or in other words, digging. Now, a trench is a type of narrow excavation in which the depth is typically greater than the width, which does not exceed 15 feet. And there are specific safety requirements for trenching depending on the depth of the trench. For example, trenches 5 feet to 19 feet in depth require a competent person to implement a protective system, and trenches 20 feet and deeper require a professional engineer to implement a protective system, not the competent person. But we'll get more into the roles and responsibilities related to this another time. Now that we know what trenching and excavation is, let's go over the 5 most common trenching and excavation hazards and how we can protect ourselves. At number 5, we have hidden utility lines. There are more than 100 billion feet of underground utilities in the US. To put that into perspective, this would mean that for every single person alive today, there is over a football field in length of utilities. So the chances of you running into one of them while excavating is pretty high. In addition to causing expensive damage to the associated infrastructure, hitting utility lines when digging can also cause electrocution and natural gas leaks, which can lead to worker fatalities. Fortunately, we can avoid hitting utility lines by simply contacting your local utility companies before you dig by dialing 811. It is important to allow the required time for the utility companies to mark their lines, or at least 2 days before starting your project. It's also important to keep in mind that utility companies don't always mark the exact location of the utilities, so be sure to hand dig until you know the exact location. Moving on to the 4th most common hazard, moving equipment and vehicles. Accidents involving construction vehicles such as dump trucks or backhoe loaders are a common hazard of trenching sites. Equipment operators might have an obstructed view, and therefore they're not able to detect that they are approaching the perimeter of the trench. It's always a good idea to use a spotter or a flagger to direct the equipment operator and prevent the vehicle from falling into the trench. Employees working in the area are also at risk of being struck by the equipment, so wearing the right protective apparel is very important. Make sure to wear a reflective vest to make yourself more visible to mobile equipment operators. If work must be performed in a location where vehicles are a hazard, be sure to use appropriate barricades to separate the traffic and the work area. Wear your reflective vest so that you're easily seen by drivers. Use flaggers when necessary, and always ensure you are working defensively. Hey, let me tell you something real quick. Closer. Come here. Subscribe to the channel. Okay, moving on to the 3rd most common hazard associated with trenching and excavation, hazardous atmosphere. Trench areas may sometimes have depleted oxygen levels, which is a hazard that must be taken into consideration in any excavation. For example, there may be a break in a gas line that you may not be aware of, or you may be excavating in a landfill. Whatever the case may be, it is for those reasons that OSHA requires atmospheric testing to be performed in excavations that exceed 4 feet. If atmospheric hazards are present, then adequate ventilation must be provided and workers must wear their appropriate respiratory protection equipment, depending on the hazard in the excavated area. Also, be sure to have emergency rescue equipment and trained responders readily available in case there needs to be a rescue. Moving on to the 2nd most common hazard in trenching and excavation work, falls and falling loads. Just because you may be working on ground level does not mean you are free from fall hazards. Some trenches can reach great depths, and there's always a hazard falling into one if you're working at surface level nearby. In addition, those working inside the trench are also exposed to being struck by or crushed by falling objects, materials, and equipment from above. This is why OSHA requires job site materials and excavated dirt to be stored at least 2 feet away from the edge of the excavation. When possible, install a barrier and safety signage around the perimeter of the excavation to clearly mark the fall hazard. Be sure to never stand underneath a suspended load, whether you're in or out of the excavation. And be sure to provide adequate walkways with standard guardrails in locations where personnel may be crossing over a trench. And finally, the most common hazard associated with trenching and excavation is, drumroll please, cave-ins. What makes this hazard so scary is that it's not only the most common, but is also the most dangerous. As it is the most excavation-related injury, most likely to result in death as they kill an average of 2 workers every month. Undisturbed soil is kept in place by natural horizontal and vertical forces of the nearby soil. When we dig in the earth, these natural forces are no longer able to hold back the soil left behind. With no support, eventually the laws of gravity take over, and the soil from the excavation walls move downward and inward into the excavation. And that is the cave-in. Cave-ins often occur suddenly, with little or no time for the worker to react. The weight of the soil crushes and twists the body, causing death or serious injury in a matter of minutes. And this can occur in any excavation of any depth, so every excavation must be taken seriously. Cave-ins are most likely to occur in unprotected excavations where the excavation is dug in unstable soil or in soil that has been dug in before, where there is excessive vibration from construction equipment or vehicle traffic around the excavation, and when there is too much weight near the sides of an excavation, most frequently from equipment or the excavated material, aka the spoil pile, being too near the edge, where water has collected in the excavation, and where there are changes in weather conditions such as sudden heavy rain or strong winds. So what's to do about this dangerous hazard? Well, you have a few options. You can either slope or bench your trench, which eliminates the hazard completely and is the preferred method for protecting against cave-ins. Or you can shore the trench, which provides support of the excavated walls to prevent collapse and cave-ins. And the final option is to shield the worker using trench boxes, which protects the worker if a cave-in occurs, but the worker must be inside the box for it to be effective. Well, there you have it, the 5 most common hazards associated with trenching and excavation, and how we can protect ourselves. We hope this video has given you a better understanding of how dangerous trenching and excavation is, and why it is so important to protect our workforce from hitting utility lines, mobile equipment and vehicles, hazardous atmospheres, falls and falling loads, and the greatest risk of all, cave-ins. Be sure to stay tuned for our next video as we will cover the different types of soil and methods for classifying soil, which will be a crucial step in choosing our protective system. If you have any questions or need assistance with your safety program, feel free to contact us using the information provided below. We'd also love to hear from you guys in the comments. Do you work with trenching and excavations? What is your preferred method to prevent cave-ins? And lastly, follow us on all social media platforms to stay updated with our latest safety tips and tricks. And until next time, be safe and thank you.